Hello and welcome to Health and Wellness, your guide to the integrated personal and financial retirement journey for physicians. I'm your host, Michael Swartz, Certified Financial Planner and Master Certified Physician Development Coach. Welcome to Health and Wellness. Last week, our guest, Sue MacLellan-Tobert, talked about her career and some of these wake-up calls, some of the curiosity, the softening and curiosity that came with her exploration throughout her career in retirement. And now, Sue, we're going to talk about your transition and what called you into retirement and how you've made successful steps towards what I believe now is a very successful retirement. And as you mentioned, retired in April of 2024. So we're just coming up on a year here.
Yeah.
And so with that introduction, Sue, where would you like to start with your retirement transition story?
I think my retirement transition story actually started, Michael, back in medical school. I got to be honest with you.
Let's
It
let's go.
was way, way back. And my husband, Darren, he's a kind of a DIY finance guy. And we had conversations early in our marriage. We got married second year of med school. How do we want this to look financially? And we wanted to be very mindful that although we're dedicating our lives to medicine and we love the practice of medicine, we want to remain practical that we need to save for our retirement. And we had some really big things we enjoyed back then. One of the biggest was travel. And so we had kind of set some very loose goals around uh, retiring in our 50s. And in fact, one of the drivers for that was his parents. His dad was a high school principal, retired in his 50s, and we loved seeing what they were doing. So we had these really great role models that we were looking at saying, wow, that looks fantastic. And so um, that helped us keep our focus that we started saving for retirement really, really early. We had some retirement goals that we wanted to meet every year, like maxing out our contributions and the percentage we were saving and the being very mindful about any debt accumulation, et cetera. And so I give him a lot of credit for being the driver in that seat, but we stuck to it. And so that is when our retirement thoughts began. But I think I've mentioned this to you before, is over time in the midst of busy life, career, family, etc., for me, those kind of got on the back burner, like they're out there, and I know we're checking our boxes for our savings, etc. But I wasn't really thinking that I'd retire when I was 58. I thought that was kind of a fantasy. I'd probably be working into my 60s, but wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could? And I had not put any deep thought into what would prompt me to retire. Like what would like how do you know how to have that thought, right? Like you
Yeah.
just finish up your career and close up the doors and take the shingle down and you're done. I don't know, right? Like there was no good education out there around that. But we read a couple powerful books. I think this one of them, and I'm not going to get the author's name correct, but he was a coach, uh, a sports coach about the second half or halftime, the after halftime, something like that. Please forgive me, and we can make reference to that in the show notes. Um,
Sure.
but it really began to stir my thoughts about, what might the second half of life look like. And as we got closer to being empty nesters and we knew we were meeting our savings goals, et cetera, more of those thoughts came forward. And I think that's just logical as you get closer to that last third of your career. But that was also at the same time that I call them pinch points, like there was more distress occurring in my life related to my career. Uh, Related to loss of autonomy, related to the medical record just overrunning me and my colleagues day in and day out. It was no longer the type of interaction I was having with the patient that was taking the majority of my time and giving me the most joy. That was kind of dwindling away because
Yeah.
of all these other duties. And as these pinch points gathered, how I'm wired is to be a little bit vocal about that and push back at administration. But as medicine became more corporate now, too, I just saw that that was not the way our leaders were thinking anymore. It was about the bottom line. Are we in the red or the green? And That became really frustrating to me, especially because I was a high producer within our department. So I felt like I had contributed much to the well-being of the department over the years, and now it was like getting blood from a stone, give more. And I didn't have a lot more to give. I was maxed out because I'd always been fully engaged. And as I began to come to that realization, I also had some health stuff pop up related to arthritis and autoimmune disease. And I realize now, I think that was my body signaling me as another pinch point. So the environment that you're putting yourself in every day, no windows, only screen time, limited patient interaction because you got other stuff to do, long work hours, many sleepless nights because of a really extensive call commitment. All of those things were creating now, 30 years into it, wear and tear, not just on my mind, but on my full self. And the more awareness I got around that, the more I felt like it was kind of almost a desperation in there that I needed to shift and do something different. And there were a few inciting events at the end that totally went against my set of values. And I'm not playing the victim here. It's just sometimes hard decisions are made by leadership that are misaligned with what we want to do in life. And then we have to make a decision ourselves. Are we going to stay in that environment or not? And when those pinch points occurred, it became clear to me it was time for me to step back from this career. It wasn't what it was for me previously. It was entirely different. It was time to change. And I think once my husband gave, it was him, he asked me, as we're looking at, what would it look like? When would you want to retire, et cetera? He asked me the question of, well, you could go anytime and retire. You could do it tomorrow if you wanted to. Make a decision, like draw a line in the sand. What do you want, Sue? And I think when those words came in from the outside, what do you want, Sue? I realized I need to practice what I'm preaching as a coach. My health is suffering because of the limited time I have and the energy drain I have from the work that I'm doing and my mental health and where I'm at. It was time to just pause and say it needs to be soon. And once I acknowledged that and gave myself permission to think about it being soon, everything fell into place. And I regained enough energy to be bold in moving the process forward to retire within a few weeks. And tidy things up well. I tidied it up as well as I could tidy up a 30-year career with some really good support from administration and leadership and the colleagues that I'd worked with for years. I'm so grateful for them. Uh, and it happened. It just happened. Not like anything I ever would have envisioned, but I had to pay attention to my whole self in this and making that decision, if that makes sense.
Completely, completely, Sue. And I think, one of the themes that every listener, two themes that every listener will probably identify with is that suffering in your role as it encroaches over time, those pinch points accumulate. And if we really turn that logical mind to the reality of the situation, it may be challenging to admit to ourselves. And so
Right.
to have someone kind of raise that mirror up and say, no, just have a good look here. What do you see? And
Mhm.
the light bulb comes on. I think there's so many physicians that are probably suffering in silence.
Yeah.
They're feeling the exact same way. And the second piece, as I heard you talking, the energy raised, and it was almost like this unstoppable force was rising to meet the immovable object, or maybe vice versa, that you
Mhm.
became this immovable object that said, no, I'm not going to let this unstoppable force, the corpus of healthcare, if you will, be the determining factor of my career trajectory. I will be an immovable object. I'm going to draw that line in the sand and say, no, but for my life journey, you can't do those things to me.
Right. Right.
I mean, how empowering was that for you as
Right.
you were looking at your retirement transition?
Right. And I think I just want to call out too that that was unique to me. It's not the same for everybody. There's people in the healthcare environment that are thriving in their careers. How wonderful. And I've had that experience, and now I'm in a different space. Um, and so I want to be really, really mindful about that. I'm not pointing fingers and blaming and trying to shame. Uh, as medicine's changed over the years, as healthcare in America has changed, it was enough of a shift that I needed to shift, right? That was
Yep.
the prompting that happened. And I was never without choice. and I was never without hope. It's just I had to muddle through it in the moment to
Yeah.
figure out what the next step was. And I think that's often what creates even the most angst for coaching clients is I'm sitting in this mud puddle and I don't want to be here. Ugh, when's it going to change? And you don't know when it's going to change. You might have to sit there for several years before it changes. So being uncomfortable with that tension and the ebb and flow of these pinch points. Uh, However, if you get to the point of extreme distress, and I wasn't at that point, but if you do, and I've seen colleagues at this point, those are really big red flags to pay attention now and do something bold and to step back immediately. Uh, and and you have that ability. You do. Um, I think that when I say you have that ability, um, we have to be very mindful about our mental health within healthcare, and the Family Medical Leave Act allows us the opportunity to say it is actually time for me to step back and take some respite and rest here, whether it's for physical challenges that are rearing their heads or mental health challenges. So you always have choice, and that I think is really important to remember.
Yeah, what a powerful piece of just permission more
Yeah.
than anything. And I do like that you point out too, these experiences will probably fall somewhere along a normal distribution, where in the middle is kind of this angst and discomfort. Most people don't go to work on Monday loving their job, but once they're in it, it feels good. That's probably the center of the bell curve, right? And
Mhm.
then some folks who are absolutely ready to retire as soon as the finances allow, and others
Right.
who, even though the finances allow, choose to stay in it. But I think across that spectrum, it's that permission to be the author of that story to the full
Mm,
extent of your capability as an individual. And
yeah.
as we talked about, that comes back to introspection, developing those values, developing that depth inside yourself that informs those conscious logical decisions, that conviction and
Yeah.
belief that gets rekindled through coaching. And
Yeah.
so with that, you make the decision to retire, you enter retirement. Now let's talk about kind of your experience over the last several months since you chose to retire. What has that been like for you, Sue?
Well, it's interesting because we've been talking about autonomy, and I think once I made the decision to retire, I felt like I had regained a little bit of autonomy about how to orchestrate my retirement, how to do my exit plan, right? And I didn't want to have any expectations of anyone else. I just wanted to um, let it unfold in a way that I enjoyed. And so it involved having no expectations of the staff to throw me a party. We did a taco bar my last day and I supplied it. So it's like I want to gift to them because I am so grateful for all the wonderful years we've spent working together. And let's just have some fun. Uh, I also knew I didn't want a big all out retirement blast because I mean, you think about wedding receptions, you can't even get around to say hi to everybody, let alone, make them feel like they're welcome and you've connected with them. And so I held a very small gathering. There were 12 of us, and we kind of just had a blowout French spring dinner. I mean, it was fantastic. I just kind of did everything that I would have wanted if I was going to have like the world's best birthday party, but it was my retirement party. And so I think that was just a really fun way for me to honor myself. And during all of this, at the same time, my husband is saying, and I'm ready for retirement now too, seeing what she's doing. So he finished up just a few months later. And then we got to dive into the stuff we love, which has been a lot of traveling and fun times with family and just finding a new, I guess, pace and new schedule, although our schedule is really loose, I got to tell you. And so it's been fun. But we did a little study around this too, because that's what we do. We're lifelong learners.
Yes.
And we came across an interesting video that talked about early in retirement when you're still feeling good. Those are your go-go years. And then maybe grandkids and family demand more of your time. Maybe those are your slow-go years. And then guess what? All joints are creaky or replaced and you can't move as much. Those are going to be your no-go years. And so we're looking at these next 5 to 7 years as our go-go years and fun, just fun. So it's all real loose and flowing and flexible, but we're definitely go-go.
Awesome. Awesome. And for those who aren't as lucky to have a Darren in their lives, where you mentioned your husband is really setting this up for your guys' success, right? The finances are in order. Um,
Right.
Find a financial planner who understands the impact of money on real
Absolutely.
life experiences. It's not just having the maximum amount of money, but it's what's the maximum experiences that
Right.
my money can afford me. And you mentioned that too, the go go, slow go, no go years. What if we did a little bit of, heavier distributions on the front end to really
Right.
celebrate and enjoy the life in retirement? And yeah, one piece that I thought you might talk about too, Sue, I thought you were going down the direction of the whole, vacation, unforeseen loss and loss, maybe a little bit of uncertainty, and then kind of climbing back through with that curiosity and discovery and trial and error back up to maybe a second high point. And it sounds like you guys are in the vacation phase to some degree, but with a very strong sense of self, right? It's not a vacation for vacation's sake per se. It was a
Right.
conscious choice.
Right.
And I think that's something that maybe gets missed oftentimes is you're choosing to celebrate because you know this is your window of opportunity.
Right. Right. Well, we did. After he retired, we had to celebrate him, and we had this lifelong dream from very early on of retiring with an Alaskan cruise, and we did that, which was fantastic. I mean, that was like a line in the sand. We are now both done, um, and we left for that cruise a day and a half after he retired. So he didn't even have time to figure out what his retirement like. We were like, boom, we're on the road. I think you're writing your own story now, and you're fully at choice and how you flex and decide what to do. And I think for us, even years and years ago with our kids, we said it's not about the number of Christmas presents you get, it's about the family experiences we have. So let's choose experiences. And you mentioned that, right? That's really important. We went on a minimalist journey probably about 10 or 12 years ago and totally cleaned out our house. It happened after my parents passed, and we saw our family going through this, cleaning out of the stuff. And I thought, I don't want to leave my kids with that. And so we started doing this ourselves. We had a huge estate sale, got rid of a ton of stuff, built a smaller house. We're still on this getting rid of stuff journey. How refreshing that was, to be able to say, we're going to do this now, not when we're dead. Similarly, when we look at our financial planning now, it might be kind of top heavy in these go-go years for spending, but one thing that sometimes future retirees don't think about is that spending over time changes because you do
Yeah.
get to those no-go years, right? So what we want to do, we're big fans of Die with Zero. I'm not sure if you're
Yeah.
familiar with that whole kind of movement. It used to be called Die Brokers. Like
Yeah.
we want to see our kids enjoy what legacy we have saved for them when we're alive. They don't need to be 75 and us dead, for them to uh, be able to, enjoy what we've saved and earned over the years. And so we've already started that part of our journey is that whole generosity piece and philanthropy piece. We're called to do that.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in to whom much has been given, much is required and requested, right? So expected. And so giving back that way, it's still part of that nurturing plan.
Yeah. I like that you bring it back to your top core value of nurturing. And I see these vacations as nurturing your freedom of spirit, your relationship with your husband, your financial planning, your financial perspective is
Mhm.
nurturing relationships to be able to recognize that in your
Right,
lifetime. I
right.
I would love to talk a little bit more too about the freedom and the I just feel like a freshness. For some reason, Sue, whenever we talk, your season seems to be spring. And so we go through kind of the spring cleaning, if you will,
Yeah,
ahead of your next phase of your retirement journey, which was
yeah.
preparing for and then ultimately transitioning into retirement. Could you talk to us a little bit more about that spring cleaning of your life and how it almost gave you that launch into this new era of Sue?
Yeah. Yeah, spring cleaning. As you mentioned that, I think back to that estate sale we had, and the gal who helped us with that said, "Don't go over to the house the day that the sale is going on. You don't want to see people walking out of the house with your stuff." And I said, "I think there's probably some joy in there I could get." So I did. I drove over to the house. I didn't go in, but I drove over and I parked on the street. And I have this really, really clear memory of this little guy, must have been 9 or 10 years of age, walking down our driveway, clutching a SpongeBob Game of Life that our kids had played for years, right? And he had this grin on his face, like he got this prize for $2 or whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, there's a big message in there that what had given us life and given my kids life and joy, et cetera, can be passed on to a stranger. How wonderful is that could be part of our calling? And so I try to ask myself every day, like, Sue, what are you doing that's passing on some life? Um, and it's not like I don't want this to sound Pollyanna, because there's days when my physical ailments really drag me down and I just need to be there to give myself life and sit and rest. But when I do have enough energy to share life, that's the creation and creativity
Mhm.
piece I think we're being called to pass on is we are creative beings. How can we help others? And what can we do to continue to care for others? Even in the midst of suffering sometimes. And so I think that I appreciate the springtime because that is absolutely my favorite season. And I'll share another brief story. When I first retired, it was in April. And so spring was starting. And I was babysitting my daughter's dog for a number of weeks while she was off studying for a big exam. And I took the dog out on our boulevard every day for, well, I mean, for probably 6 weeks. And I saw our trees and plants in our yard bloom. I saw the grass sprout. I saw the sunshine every morning, the clouds passing. To me, it was like I had missed spring by going to work every day into a building early in the morning. I had been unable to see that new life was out there happening every day. And so that messaging over 6 weeks to encounter spring happening, I mean, it makes me feel emotional right now, is that the rest of the world was going on. And for some reason, I was buried really neat, head deep in the sand with my work. How do we find a better balance in the midst of our work so that we can still appreciate spring? I don't know the answer there. It took retirement to let me see it afresh and anew. I don't have an answer.
No, but I mean, how powerful of an invitation is that to maybe explore a point nine or a point eight, schedule the sabbatical or take the PTO to
Yeah,
just give your retirement a test run, even if it's a week, even if it's 2 weeks, maybe a
yeah.
month, just go feel what you haven't felt for so long. And as you know, Sue, one of my favorite tools of coaching is metaphor. And really the one that keeps popping up in our conversation here from the even when you mentioned in our last conversation about being whole, creative, and resourceful is it's almost like seeds where we
Mhm.
have all the information that we need, but it takes planting and watering and nurturing. And if it goes unaddressed, seeds can become dormant for
Right,
several years. And then you mentioned planting this seed of really regrowth and rejuvenation of self. And
right,
you see the sapling, provided it's in a safe environment in a welcoming container, it can prosper. And the more sunlight and positivity, the more that tree can grow. And
right.
really what I'm hearing you say is now here in this generative period of life, you're the big old oak tree or the big old maple tree that when the leaves fall down, you mentioned it can come with some feeling of loss or hardships, but
Mhm.
those leaves ultimately become nutrients for what's growing
Right,
on the floor, and
right.
both for ourselves and for other trees. And you're out spreading your seeds and planting seeds in others of wisdom, of knowledge, of autonomy, and fertilizing those for others now. And so that's wonderful, whether it's financially or as a coach, as a physician, you're really helping those seeds grow. But it started all back with really being given permission to explore that inside of yourself.
Mhm. I appreciate that, Michael. I actually thought you were not going to kind of make the connection with the big old oak tree because what I was envisioning literally was being that young sapling again. And the thing
Yeah.
is, right, you finish retirement and you're like, okay, now I'm old. I've finished a career. I'm near the end. I got what, 25 years left, yada, yada. And in fact, the refreshing thing for me is this is a type of growth I've not experienced before. When you enter into medical training in your 20s and then you are in that career for so long, you don't get to see spring a lot, and you don't get to at the last minute make a decision about where you want to travel to, or have that great degree of flexibility, or be able to sleep in one day and not the next. You're in a really controlled environment. And so I actually feel like a sapling.
Well, maybe it is, Sue. Maybe the career grew to this big old oak with tons of seeds that were
Yeah,
dormant because they
true.
were overshadowed by this big old tree that is your
Yeah,
career. And when that tree falls over or we choose to cut it down, there's all these saplings that have been
yeah,
within that information since the beginning, right? It's within the original
exactly.
tree seed. It's grown, it's prospered, and it's scattered all these different seedlings about. And you get to be the sapling again, the new kid on the block, and take that old growth out
Right.
and let the
Hmm.
new forest grow
Yeah,
and to cultivate it.
beautiful. Yeah,
So
beautiful. You're right.
thank you for expanding on that metaphor, taking it and running with it too, Sue. And it's going to be more than anything, Sue, what I hope from these conversations is permission for others to explore within themselves.
Mhm.
And I think ultimately that's where you found your success is this personal journey and development that takes place. It's the journey that accompanies the retirement transition.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sue, for sharing your story, for inviting us in, for giving us a peek, and really, I think giving others permission to reflect on their own journey. Because
Mhm.
as you mentioned, it can feel like this dormancy period, it can feel like the snowfall in the wintertime, where things just really are in a point of stuckness. And what better metaphor for the springtime than the mud and the muck? And
Yeah.
but to see it unfold, to be walking the dog and say, I've missed this for 3 decades
Right.
and that slowing down, that moment to pause, I do. Sue, that was a wonderful story. Thank you for
Mhm.
opening up about your experience with us on the Health and Wellness podcast.
Well, you're welcome, Michael. Thank you for the invitation to be here with you. And I so much appreciate your reflections and how you helped me process this a little further too. And so I'm very grateful for that. Please know that. Please know that.
Absolutely. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. And I think as coaches, as you've mentioned, sometimes we don't do the best job just saying you're welcome. We go to reflect it right back. And so permission to others to say you're welcome too. So if you'd like to hear more about Sue, the last piece here, I'd love for you to share too. As part of your retirement, you got this really cool opportunity that you and Darren are exploring now. Would you like to share a bit about that?
Yeah. So yes, an opportunity crossed our doorstep, several months actually before retirement. And we are working with Influent Network located in Omaha, Nebraska. And we have season 2 of our Meet the Toberts podcast coming out in the end of January here. And we really talk about thriving in and out of medicine, like doing the hard stuff too. So I've previously mentioned the highlights and lowlights in life and how these pinch points happen and how we rise above and learn from them and move forward. And so we kind of have these conversations, my husband Darren and I, about what medicine has been like for us as a couple with over 80 years of experience in medicine together, raising kids, family stuff. We do have some guests on our podcast. We actually, I think, in season 1, one of the favorite ones has been episode 8 with our daughter, who's a third year med student, and she really reflects on what it was like to be the child of 2 physicians. And so, gosh, there's some real candid comments in there. So, yes, meet the Toberts on Influent Network. Tons of fun.
Excellent. And so for those of you looking for to meet Sue virtually, you can be an audience to meet the Tolberts podcast. And again, if you're looking to contact her directly, a wealth of knowledge, a phenomenally accomplished physician development coach and physician. You can find her at healingedgecoaching.com. Sue, anything else before we sign off? Any final words from you?
I guess just stay curious, right? Be open to reflect on yourself, and that's the beginning of the journey.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for listening to the Health and Wellness podcast. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Health and Wellness Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Michael Schwartz, Certified Financial Planner and Master Certified Physician Development Coach. If you're looking for additional resources for integrated physician retirement planning, please visit healthandwellness.com. We'll see you in the next episode.